I am the Reading Rainbow Emperor, and I am reviewing John C. Wright's Awake in the Nightland. Yeah, it's good stuff. John C. Wright's Awake in the Nightland stands as the best fiction Castalia House has ever put out, except maybe Iron Chamber of Memory by the same author. It is set in the Nightlands, a vast and dangerous universe created by William Hope Hodgson. In the Nightland, all mankind is bound up in the last redoubt, a 7-mile high pyramid made of impenetrable metal and defended by the air clog and other cunning machines built to fight the subtle dangers that siege it. For danger abounds in every corner. Scorpions hide under the earth. Giants work kilns, creating ever more dangerous weapons to use against mankind. Silent ones stalk the night on mysterious and assuredly harmful tasks. The night hounds howl in their dreadful hunts, and greater than they are the behemoths and the watchers at the compass points, each unique, each monstrous, each evil. And it's not just the monsters that bring dangers. A swiftly turning wheel can descend from the sky and slay on sight. Obelisks carved with horrid sigils have vampiric minds of their own. Ruins of bygone civilizations rot. No life ever comes from their choked cobblestones. As the Watchers are above the giants and others, so too is the House of Silence. No one ever returns from the House of Silence, neither hint nor sound, not even in the next life. For dangers that abound are not just physical, but spiritual as well. The soul can be destroyed or devoured, and so, if anyone is taken by the tolling bell, or the slowly turning wheel, or by some mental attack of the House of Silence, it is better for adventurers to take their own life with a capsule embedded in their forearm, and be reincarnated in the next one. It is not all bad. Like dolphins coming upon drowning sailors unaware, rarely, so rarely, a good power will save or offer salvation to an imperiled adventurer. Sometimes the gift is refused, other times it is taken, and it has never been proven evil. But it cannot be trusted, for who knows what moves the heart of the good powers, and they do not save everyone in peril. Only love, the one thing that binds spirits together across time and space, can be depended on to guide men and women to a good end or to perdition. But it does guide. Awake in the Nightland contains 4 short stories about love. Each has 2 love themes. The first is Awake in the Nightland, and it's the love between friends and the love of lovers. That is Eros, in case you want to use the Greek. Then we have Cry of the Night Hound, the love between siblings, also the love of a hound and a master. Silence of the Night, the love between son and father, also the love of future and future generations. Then we had The Last of All Sons, romantic love, and the love of God. I'll have a video for each. This is the video for Awake in the Nightland. It's probably the best of the bunch. Telemachus goes after his friend Perithos, who calls out to him from somewhere deep in the Nightland, even after he is supposed to be dead. Telemachus and Perithos become friends during punishment detail. Their friendship becomes fast until a girl by the name of Helenor comes between them and attaches herself to Perithos. Those two are denied marriage by their parents and hatch a foolish plan. Helenor has to go out with Perithos into the Nightlands, which was it's forbidden to women. They hoped to find a branch of the protective and life-giving earth current in one of the ruined cities out in the far depths, and found a new city, the two of them and their family. Of course, it fails. This is not one of those worlds with such happy endings. Perithos is captured, and Helenor is caught by the powers of the Nightland. Perithos is captured by his own people, just so you know. Perithos is sent out after her by the authorities of the last redoubt, that 7-mile pyramid. Telemachus, driven by the feeling that his friend has not died, goes out to confirm the death or to return with whoever lives. He finds Perithos after some adventures and returns with him. Perithos reveals that he did discover a branch of the earth current which can be turned to the benefit of the last redoubt. But he also reveals that Helenor bore a monster child, and he slew the both of them. Telemachus drags him back to the last redoubt, refusing to give up to him in the end. Let's see here. Here's the book, by the way, and all my little notes for it. Let's grab something from it. There we go. My goodness. So many good quotations. Here we go. At first, one of them could see the future, and the other could see thoughts. Both were bold, nobly born, and love-drunk. How was a duenna to keep them under watch? Talking about Perithos and Helenor. Let's see here. There's a great scene. There we go. Beyond the doors I felt nothing but more sand, and here and there a slab of stone or a huge column of bent and rusted metal. I trusted nothing alive here, no earth current pulsing through power lines, no throb of living metal. The place where wholesome men dwell often will carry a sense in the ether, like the perfume of a beautiful woman who has just left the chamber, a hint that something wholesome and fair had once been here, that there was nothing like that here. Instead, I felt a coldness. I felt no horror or fear in my heart, and I realized how strange that must be. I was surely near the center of the ring of behemoths bent, where the ring of the behemoths bent their gaze, even in the dark. I should have felt it as a weight on my heart, a sense of suffocation in my soul. Instead, I was at ease, or else benumbed. How very silent it was here. Slowly at first, and then with greater speed, I backed away from the broken gates that had once housed the stronghold of Usire. Blind in the utter dark, I ran. I was still in the open when the gray light came again, and slowly trembled from cloud to cloud overhead, lighting the ground below with fits and starts, a dull beam touching here, a momentary curtain of light falling there, allowing colorless images to appear and disappear. I beheld a mighty ruin where once had been a metropolis. Its dome was shattered and rent, and its towers were utterly dark. Here and there among the towers were shapes that were not towers, and their expressionless eyes were turned down, watching the ruins at their feet, waiting with eternal, immortal patience for some further sign that life had been quenched here countless ages ago. More than merely giants stood waiting here. The gray light shifted through clouds, and beams fell me. A great company of hooded figures, shrouded in long gray veils, stood without noise or motion, facing the broken walls. They were tall as tall men, but more slender. The nearest was not more than 12 feet from me, but its hood was facing away. The next two of the coven stood perhaps 20 feet from me, near the broken gate. It was a miracle I had not brushed against them in the dark as I crept between them, unknowing of my danger. Even as quiet as I was, how had they not heard the tiny noises I had made, creeping in their midst? Then I knew. It was not a noise carried by the air they needed. It was not with ears they heard. They were spirits, mighty, fell, and terrible, and they did not never sleep. They did never sleep nor pause in their watch. 100 years, 1,000, a million, meant nothing to them. They had been waiting for some unwise child of man to sneak forth from the last redoubt to find the empty house of Usire, dead these many years. They had been waiting for a thought of fear to touch among them, fear like mine. With one accord, making no sound at all, the dozens of hooded figures turned, and their hoods now faced me, which is a good example of the horror that the Nightlands have. It's good stuff. The story most carefully keeps with the spirit of the Nightland of the story most carefully keeps to the spirit of the Nightlands of the four stories, of course. The wording is the right type of ethereal. It seems real, but also dreamlike. It is something more than merely the reader watching their actions through the written medium. The best way I can describe it is that everyone is posed like a Greek statue at all times, or similar painting or desire, more romantic than it is logical. Their reactions are not hidden, but are over the top, dramatic in the best ways. It is not hysterics or anything negative like that. The father of Telemachus is stern and stoic, so that it seems to be his only character. But then he tells Telemachus why he is willing to send the boy out into the terrors of the Nightland. Telemachus has brothers. Why does he matter then? Or Perithous, being an athlete, surely must know how to place his body to perfectly align it with the world around him. The same with Helenor, Telemachus as well, but in the end, when he is a full-grown, but only at the end, when he is a full-grown man, grown to handle the terrors of the Nightland. What's more, actually, excuse me. There is a good way to describe it. So this is, there we go. Perithous and Telemachus has found Perithous in a stasis chamber, and they are talking to each other psychically, because it's one of those stories. Let's see here. There we go. So he's talking about how he prepared Helenor to go out, and that he gave her a gun, which is a foolish weapon, because of course the noise and sound and light would gather any monsters there, like shooting off of a flare gun at sea. You know why the ancients forbade us to use such weapons. The energy can be sensed from miles away, even of a single shot. Or do you? How little do you know of the world you live in? Let's see, no, wait, that's not the one I want. There we go. Ah, I'm sorry, I started too soon. I'll get to that part in a bit. More images. Perithous has sent her out. He lowered her on a rope from a window in the postern gate and watched her walk away. His gift allowed him to choose a time, when the port reeve was one who admired his fame too much to turn him in, and the gate warden he could blackmail with knowledge taken from the man's own guilty mind. The enormity of the crime was too great for me to take in. I was overcome with emotion. At that moment, the strength left my legs, and I sat. My weapon I put down. For the first time it had left my grip in weeks. I put my head in my hands. Madness, I said. Madness. There were simpler ways to die that do not carry hundreds of dead down with you. Was she so jealous of Murdath, who was the star of the first story, along with Andros? Did the law that forbids women to walk the Nightland offend her so much? Did she so much want to be thought of more manly than a man? Is it not enough for her that she was more fair than women? A picture came from his brain elements into the visual centers of my brain. It was an image of Eleanor, her eyes filled with childish faith in the man she loved. She raised a gauntlet too large for her slender hand that bore it, and tilted back a helmet too large for her, and raised her mouth for one last kiss before she slid down a rope from a small window in the postern gate. Away across the black and grainy soil of the nightland she walked, and there she was, outlined for a moment against the glow of the electric circle. Then she was gone. She had not been moving as those who are trained to move, skulking from rock to rock, or standing motionless to let one's gray cloak blend with the gray-black background, avoiding discolored patches of ground. She did not know how to walk. And she dragged the great weapon behind her, for the weight was more than she could bear. She wheeled it like a wheelbarrow on its blade, an image that would have been comical if it wasn't so horrifying. I was imagining her, surprised by a petty worm or scorpion touching off the voltage and sending a lightning bolt echoing across the darkened land. I imagined the thing we see shadowed in one of the windows of the House of Silence, tilting its dark head toward the source of the energy noise. I imagined night hounds, pack upon pack, swarming down from the lesser dome of far too many doors, baying as they came. Woo! Let's see here. What's more, the adventures of Telemachus haunt the mind far beyond any other of the stories here, even of the original work, partially because of the length of the original work as well as the shortness so it's more memorable of the story. The floating silent one staring at the dead city, which is what I read, the cryogenic storage unit, Perithos' story, Telemachus meeting Helenor and Perithos in the garden. They are each as memorable to me as a Renaissance painting. Only the scene in the fourth story where the varied last men sit around the porthole and stare into the last sun match any of them. But that'll be in my fourth video. There is a sort of melancholy in this story that is the strongest of the four, unlike the second, Cry of the Night Hound, which is a bit warped. It doesn't quite hit the marks right, which I'll describe later, or the third, The Silence of the Night, which is despairing and not at all triumphant in the end of love or anything, or the fourth, which is Last of All Sons, which I mentioned earlier, which ends triumphantly. The characters seem most noble and most ideal. Even though there's failures in Helenor and Perithos' character, their exaggeratedness and the burning coal of their love, even though it ended in deep tragedy, still shines brighter, partially because of the tragedy, but also because of how John C. Wright writes it. They are human, but hit certain archetypes without literally being the archetypes. Perithos is an athlete, but also a rebel, and when it comes down to it, he is a brave fool. Telemachus is careful, studied, seems nerdy, but he proves brave, and he's one of the few men who can say that they have survived going out into the night. And that's a very short list. Helenor is beautiful and seems virtuous, and dies for love, which overcomes any reason and wisdom that she might have. And I'm not spoiling it for you guys, but she dies very horribly. It's one of those things. It's like, ooh, tragedy. But excuse me. Back to business. And love is the focus of this story, as it is all others. In this one, it is love between two best friends. It is a kind of brotherhood that transcends blood, and cares not what state either are in. It's about having someone protecting your back, or holding up your shoulder, as you do the same for him. It's about having their back and holding them up when they need it. It isn't so much about his person as it is his soul. It's a pretty wonderful thing. In the modern world, it's one of the attacks by the enemy. How can men encourage each other if they have to say no homo, bro, every time they accidentally touch? Or, more seriously, if encouraging each other brings out or causes mockery of some perceived weakness? Contrast it to the. Hmm? Okay, we're still good. Contrast it with this. Now, Perithos is popular, and Telemachus is unpopular. Once, when the head boy and his gang had locked me into the cable wheel closet so that I would be absent from the feast day assembly and gift giving, Perithos left the assembly, a thing forbidden by the headmaster's rules, took up a practice blade from the arms locker, and spun the charged blade against the closet door hinges, shattering the panel with a blast of noise. Not just school proctors, but civic rectors and the men of the corridor guard arrived. To use one of the great weapons well inside the pyramid was a grave offense, and neither one of us would admit who did it, even though they surely knew. We both were scourged by the headmaster, and given triple duty, and had porridge for our holiday feast, while other boys dined on viands and candied peaches. Perithos and I ate alone in the staff commissary, our shirts off so that our backs would heal, shivering in the cold of the unheated room. We were not allowed to speak, but I tipped my bowl into the board and wrote in the porridge letters from set speech. Shed blood makes us brothers. I shall return the deed. Even at that age he was taller than the other lads, broad of shoulder, and quick of eye and hand, and the victor of every sporting contest, the darling of those who wagered on gymnastics games. He was as well liked as I was ill liked, so I expected to see doubt, or worse, a look of patronizing kindness in his eye. But he merely nodded, wiped away the porridge stain with his hand quickly, so that the proctor would not see the message. Under the table, with perfect seriousness, he clasped my hand with his, and we shook on it. Porridge dripped through our fingers, but nonetheless that hand clasp was sacred, and he and I were friends. At that time, none of us knew Eleanor of High Airy. It's a pretty wonderful thing. How can the nightlands be braved if there is no one to say, "Pray, and keep your powder dry, brother"? Or can the strength of one encourage the weaknesses of the other, if men's connections are damaged and feminized? Can I seek my friend, who is lost and wondering if he is being told that my care for him is abuse, or that he can ignore me because I simply don't understand him? Or can my friend pull me out of madness and despair if he will not get close to me? The damage of the modern world is severe, and it strikes at every opportunity it can. It is a monster with no form or really head or anything of that nature that we can strike at. And with luck, it'll heal of its own kind in the spirit and goodness of men and the blessings of the Most High God. But we'll see. The Nightlands are much more real than people would probably like to admit, because the greatest dangers, are spiritual there. So Awaken the Nightland is thus made more beautiful, more precious for it. Eleanor is slowly pushed aside as a tragedy as the story goes on. Telemachus cares for the living Perithos, so that despite the tragedy, they can continue on. The erotic love that young lovers can have for each other is in the end a lot weaker than the love that two men can have for each other, and use to pull each other through the most terrible of circumstances. It's still sad, but those two men, Perithos and Telemachus, when they return to the last redoubt, can keep going in their lives, even though they will both be forever marred by the tragedy of Eleanor of High Airy. But this is the Nightlands. It's to be expected. This is my first video of my 4-part video series about Awake in the Nightland by John C. Wright. Check it out for yourself. I'll have a link in the doobly-doo below. Thank you for listening. This is the Reading Rainbow Emperor, out.